Bang! Needs knives. I'm Jared. My lovely wife Kara is busy, and this is the Benchmade Fact. I've never checked one of these out. This is the first time. This one is in for some maintenance work. It does have a lot of love on it, and you can see a bunch of edge damage. So we're gonna tune it up. Now, when it first got here, it was pretty stiff. So instead of taking it apart and polishing the washers and everything, I just ran a rag through it, used a little KPL on it, some knife pivot lube, and it definitely made it a lot better. I first started with the KPL heavy, put one little drop on each side right here on the pivot, and it smoothed it out a lot. But I wanted it just a little bit more smoother, so we put a little bit of KPL light right after that, and it seemed to do the trick. Now, some Benchmades are smoother than others. This one's just, it's a little stiffer than some, and maybe even smoother than others. Like, it's not quite as smooth as my Griptillian. It's very similar to my Bugout, though, which used to be very drop shutty until I got these RC Bladeworks scales, but it's still at a level where it's very, very smooth. I don't have to thrust really hard to get it to close. With this one, I did it first, and I could tell it just needed a little cleaning. So, they're not all as smooth. And here's my mini Griptillian. They're not all as smooth as that. And, this is still very, very smooth. So no complaints on the action. The action's actually very nice. So after I'm done, I'm going to give my real impression of the knife, what I think of the knife, what I think it's for, who I think it's for, what I think it's good at, and so on and so forth. But first, what we're going to do is we're going to start off with doing some steel removal now. So you can see there is a significant amount of damage to the edge. We will get a close-up of the edge before and after, and we'll do some steel removal. Now, the owner opted for a freehand sharpening, which I think is awesome. I'd way rather do a freehand service than an electric service or a fixed angled system or anything like that. So I'm going to do some steel removal on here. Now, I could just use the electric system just to remove some steel before freehand sharpening, but most likely I'll just put it to the diamond plate and remove it. We'll get into that in 1 second. And then we will put a new edge bevel on this, and he wants a toothy working finish, which is awesome. So let's get into it, and then we'll do our opinion on it afterwards. So first, we are going to start with just an aluminum oxide stone. We might move to a diamond, just depending on how difficult it is to remove the steel. Shouldn't be too hard. Now, I measured the stone, or I measured the thickness behind the edge at 20 thousandths to start with. So originally, it has 20 thousandths behind the edge with the factory edge. We are going to have to remove a decent amount of steel, but shouldn't be too bad. This is a flat ground knife, so the more steel you remove, the thicker behind the edge it gets. We want to basically get rid of about 90% of the damage, and the other 10% will come out in the sharpening. This is just soap and water I'm using right there. Acts as a lubricant, kind of like an oil. And we'll come back as soon as I'm done. I'm basically just scrubbing the edge on an aggressive stone, an aggressive aluminum oxide stone, to remove steel. Okay, now that we have the steel removed, let's take a look at the edge. You still see there's still a little bit of damage. But from here, we should be able to remove it. We got one significant chip right there. So instead of using my venev diamond stones, I'm going to use my regular diamond plates. I do have some of these linked in the description if you want to get some yourself. This is the 2x6s. The other stones are 3x8s, so they are bigger. This one is a little bit smaller, but being straight diamond, they cut extremely fast. So I'm going to sharpen this right around 20 degrees per side. I think that will be a good angle for this knife. We don't want to put too crazy big of a bevel on it because of it being a short blade. We don't want it to look ridiculous. This 300 grit diamond is very aggressive and removes steel very quickly. Looking very good already. The thumb studs do get in the way, so I have to go at an angle. We do have a burr already, but so I'm gonna flip, but I'm probably gonna come back over to the other side to make sure that we get all of that chip removal out. I am using this dry. You can use water or lubrication on these if you choose to. It does help them last longer. I don't really worry about it. I like it not to be as messy by just using it dry and wiping the steel dust off. Okay, now that we have our edge bevel set on both sides, right around 20 degrees, we are going to flip to a 600 grit diamond plate. If you're interested in getting a set of diamond plates, just a metal plate with diamonds on the surface for knife sharpening, I have a whole bunch of sharpening stuff listed down in the description, along with a whole bunch of other stuff like the KPL, Strops, and so on and so forth. A whole bunch of different sharpening stuff that definitely is very useful. just so you guys know, I don't recommend leaving any damage for the next stone. Like I'm doing right now, I don't recommend that because you usually wind up getting stuck trying to remove more steel with a stone that cuts not as fast. So you wind up just doing more work. At this point, I can range how much steel I'm going to wind up removing from that stone. So, you know, it does take a long time, and there's been so many times that I should not have moved to the next stone, which was like 90% of the time. So I definitely do not recommend that. Get all your work done on the coarsest stone or the previous stone or your first stone before you move on to your next stone. Even if you're trying to preserve steel, that's still a better way to go. You'll just spend a lot longer time on the next stone that you shouldn't have to. And you're going to wind up removing the same amount of steel anyways. Okay, now that we've folded the burr over a couple times, now we are going to do burr removal. If you're interested in any of these terms I'm using, I have a whole playlist of sharpening videos that teach tips and tricks and break down some of the phrases. Right now I'm just removing the steel that I folded over. And I'm basically folding it over, back and forth, until it breaks off. Which should leave a nice, crisp edge. I'm very lightly rubbing it on this ceramic rod. Ceramic is extremely hard, even harder than steel, and has no problem sharpening or folding the steel with very, very little pressure, if any at all. And now we will use a strop. I have 1 micron diamond spray on this strop, DMT diamond spray on this strop, leather strop. These also work really good for maintaining your edges in between sharpening. Very nice. Let's test it on some paper. Okay, so let's take a look at this through some paper. Now, before, it would not go through paper whatsoever. It would just wrinkle the paper. I mean, it wouldn't even go through it, not even a tiny, tiny bit. The entire edge was damaged. And now, No problem. As you can see. Anyways, let's take a close look at the edge. Now, the owner asked for a toothy finish, which I think was the better option. You know, I gave him the choice between, you know, basically whatever edge he wanted. Now, why do I think this edge is better than if he would have chose, say, an edge like this with a mirror polish? Why do I, even though this might be a little prettier with its polished edge, this knife is very short. It's not tall. So the geometry on this knife is not going to be for slicing. It's not going to be the greatest. And after all the steel removal we had to do to give it life back, you know, we want as much bite in the material as possible. And you're going to get the most amount of bite in the material from a toothy finish. That way, when you start to cut in the material, the teeth on the edge is going to bite into it, and then the blade can continue to pass through. Now, what is this knife for? Now, this knife isn't made for slicing. Let me just say that right now. This is not a slicing knife. And even more so now after removing so much steel. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. This knife is going to be for stabbing, light utility use, meaning whatever type of cutting with the tip, holding a knife like this, doing, you know, cuts with your tip, and light duty cuts, meaning, you know, you might pop a strap, you might cut one piece of cardboard, something like that, some string, some rope here and there. But that's going to be the last thing that it's good at. It's mostly going to be good at penetration and utility cuts. And it's going to be light utility cuts at that, because you don't have a belly pulling the material into the tip. So, you know, even though the tip is very pokey, you know, it's just going to, it'll be good at opening things, you know, drawing stuff out, but you're not going to want to crank down onto the tip, you know, with a lot of pressure into utility cuts. But that's what it's going to do the best at, though, is utility cuts or, you know, penetration. Now, for slicing, the reason why it's not that great is because the blade is so short. The taper from the spine, you know, the thickest part is in the middle of the blade. So it's not like it starts from here and goes down to here. It starts from the middle of the blade and then down. So the angle of the blade is like this rather than like this. This goes through material better than like this. And, you know, before, you know, like say from the factory, it was a little bit better than now, because now, you know, after sharpening it, you know, we had to remove quite a bit of steel. Which regular maintenance on your knife, if you can, you know, try to keep up with your edge a little bit, you know, through stropping and honing and stuff like that. And then you can, you know, prevent, say, sharpening and also long-term use, having to remove all that steel, because instead of doing, say, a regular sharpening, you know, if you don't maintain your edge, you're going to have to do a heavy-duty sharpening like we had to do here. But a regular sharpening, you don't have to remove a lot of steel. But when you have chips and stuff in the edge, you know, it's just, which is normal. It's a knife, it's a tool, so, you know, no big deal. Now, what do I think about this knife? One, the action's so much better than it was, which is really good. But I like it. I think it's cool. I think it fits a good bill. It's going to be a good self-defense knife / light EDC knife. It's not going to be the best performing EDC knife, but if your EDC tasks with your knife, you know, like, aren't that heavy, you know, you don't use your knife as a work knife, you know, or anything like that. You carry your knife for a just in case scenario, and if you need a knife, you have one. That's what this knife is for. And that doesn't mean you might not have other knives that are gonna do the other things way better. You will, but maybe on the day, I'm not cutting nothing today. I'm not, I'm going out and about. I have no reason to use my knife today, but just in case, I got this one and it'll work in a pinch, but it'll also be a great self-defense knife if you need one as a last ditch effort. Now it's going to carry pretty well. I haven't carried it or anything like that, but it does have a deep carry clip. Benchmade's clips are pretty good. It does have some texture. I don't know how it goes in and out of the pocket because, like I said, I'm not using or carrying this. This is just my opinion on this knife through sharpening. Now, also, this knife is not as sharp as it could be. Now, I did not lay the edge back because I could have laid the edge back to 17 degrees, which would have brought the edge bevel up really high because it's thick. The lower you make your angle when sharpening, instead of being like this sharpening, you're down like this, the taller your edge bevel gets. And with such a short blade, it would look ridiculous. So I did not lay the edge back, which in return, it's not going to be as sharp as it could be. It's very sharp, don't get me wrong. It'll shave hair, it'll go through paper. It's very, very sharp, but not as sharp as, say, if it was a thinner grind, a taller blade with a thinner grind, or if I would have laid the edge back. It's just the nature of the beast. You don't want to lay the edge back too far on such a short blade with such a short grind like this, especially when it's not for that. Now, the knife did get thicker behind the edge after sharpening. It was originally 20 thousandths. It did go up to 25 thousandths, but that's what you're going to get when you have such a short flat grind. This is why I love hollow grinds so much. But being this type of blade, it is what it is. That's what you get. So it did start creating a tiny bit of a smile. Now, that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have to remove so much steel, but it's just a result because it actually did have a really decent choil. But you look at, this is probably considered 10 sharpenings, maybe a little less, maybe 5, but when you have to remove that much steel from damage. But you see the edge is starting to create just a little bit of a smile back there. No big deal, but it was originally just fine. So I forgot to mention that I did have to Loctite the thumb studs. The thumb studs were coming loose. So I did check all the hardware to make sure they were nice and tight, and these were actually falling off. So I took them off, put some Loctite on them. Now they should never, ever come off again. I made sure I used a little drop of red Loctite. Now, other hardware, no, you do not use red Loctite. You use blue Loctite, medium hold. But the thumb studs, I don't think he's going to be taking them off anytime in the future. So we put some red Loctite on there for him. And now it's good and sharp and ready for action. I love you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Peace.